Kohler, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
There was obviously a lot of discussion there about the lawyers speaking freely, as they do, don't want things to get out. But one date that was important is that FERC is involved in all this too, and there's still sort of a concern over the race to the courthouse aspect of this. FERC has until June the 12th to I guess it's to accept or decline Tri-State's mark-to-market methodology that they filed. And it's not known at this time whether the FERC will accept it or decline it. Tri-State is, of course, asked for them to accept and approve it retroactively. And the Colorado PUC has filed against that happening, as well as we have. And so hopefully a race to the courthouse won't occur. In the crazy situation where FERC might accept it and approve it, then it would be who gets it done first. Will the PUC make its decision or the FERC on that? The PUC timeline is that the case is now done, but we have until May the 28th. Let's see, that's 8 days for final briefs to be filed by LPEA and Tri-State and United Power. Those briefs are just kind of wrap up in a summary, if you will. There can't be any new evidence produced in that. And then the ALJ has a pretty long period of time where he then rules, but he's made it as clear as he can. And from their prior experience working with this ALJ, whose name is Garvey, he's fast. And so they expect what they're calling midsummer by a final ruling to take place. Actually, the final, after the administrative law judge rules, if nobody appeals that ruling, it's done and fixed. If one of the parties appeals it, it goes in front of the 3 PUC commissioners, who then kind of sit as an appellate court, and then they would make either overturn it, modify it, or accept it. Typically, they accept what the ALJ comes out with. But that's how it might drag into midsummer, which is probably to be expected, unless both parties are really happy with the ruling and accept the ALJ ruling. Somebody will probably appeal it to the Colorado PUC. Those were specifically some highlights that I got from that.
Things are moving.
Yeah, I think there was a surprise almost that the case ended by early this afternoon. It sounded like the witness, Rick Gordon, took the longest, and it could have even ended sooner, but they ended up, for whatever reason, he was grilled the hardest.
Thank you.
Jessica, there is still quite a lot, although some of it I know goes a little faster at this time on the agenda. Mm-hmm. I know one thing, that there's a couple things that we can put off, but there's a few resolutions on here that I assume need to be taken care of.
Yes.
8, 10, and 11, is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we won't have annual meeting after action review. I'm not even sure why that's on there, because that would have been after the actual business meeting annual review.
Yes.
And yes, and then I think that, of course, the others are left up to the board members on the director reports.
Okay, we'll do our best to march through. I know it always takes a long time when we talk to the lawyers.
I have a question for you, Drew.
Yes, sir.
Is 5 minutes the max timeout on the iPad?
It is. Yeah, it's set by a global policy. But if it's causing you grief, I can look into adjusting that out a little longer.
Yeah, I just listened to a conversation, turn around and it's gone again. I'm
Right.
having to log back in.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
And I've got problems with my docs. I've got a lot of board of director categories that it's empty. There should be documents in there and there's none there.
I'm sorry, where is that? In the
In the Google
Drive?
Docs, in Google Docs. In the board, especially the board of directors category.
Take a look at that.
Yeah, I can't get the board meeting or committee meeting sign-in sheets unless somebody's already opened it.
They should take multiple people editing at the same time, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Right. I wonder if we need to have you sign out and back in, Dan, on the Google Drive, because it should have content in there.
Yeah, I know. I had this problem last month and I'm just waiting for this, for you guys to open up so I come in and let you look at it.
You might be signed in under a different Google ID. You could try going to the right-hand side of your Google page and change your account. You might have a personal Google account. Just make sure you're signed in under your LPEA account.
I do not have any other Google accounts.
Okay, it looks like
You're
most
not
of us.
fast district, whatever.
All right, let's go ahead and get started again. The last bit of business I wanted to take care of with the Finance and Audit Committee is, in a sense, to reinstitute that committee by appointing Tim Wheeler the chair again. And I have been on that committee and plan on continuing on it as well. And I'm going to ask, there's 2 more slots on that committee. Who would be interested in being on the Finance and Audit Committee? I know Dan is now. Dan, if you're interested again, I will give you preference, but let's see who else is interested too.
Yes, I'd like to continue.
All right, then I will find out who else is interested. And if there's more than one person, I will take it under consideration and get back to you at a later time. I see Bob Lynch and Kirsten Skian.
Sue McWilliams, she posted an interest when she didn't get the treasurer. She wanted to be on the finance committee. That was her request.
All right, yeah, I don't see her log back in here. I'll take that under consideration. So I've got 3 names to fill 1 slot. I will consider that and make the final selection of that committee before Tim needs to mail out the invitation or set up the next meeting. I think we kind of have a standard meeting time. All right, the next committee is the Policy Committee. They haven't had any meetings. Gwen put in our board packet his last report and was hoping to get it started again. So I'm going to do the same thing, ask who would like to be on that and take that into consideration to eventually appoint a chair and to have other people. Shay participates in that, and Kohler was on it before, and so I will give him a nod if he chooses to be on again, because he certainly has good with words and has been helpful, but I know he's got other tasks now too, so may not want to be. So please, those who would like to be on the Policy Committee, unmute and let me know at this time so I can take your names. Nobody.
I'll offer. This is Jack.
It's an important committee, although it's not so much fun sometime.
I
All
could
right.
work on that too, Brett. My issue is meetings in the middle of the day. I just can't do them. So if we could look at starting meetings at 4 o'clock or something like that, that'd be helpful.
All right. So we've got a
Brett?
couple possibilities. Yes.
Brett, I am not interested in being on that committee, but I would like people to consider having actually policies done by the committees that it affects. So for instance, if it's a financial policy, that the finance committee actually owns those policies, as opposed to, and that the only thing that drops down to the policy committee would be ones that don't really have a home.
That's probably an awful lot of them though, but yeah, I hear your point. Okay, well, I've got a couple of names, and I will perhaps reach out to some others and encourage them and see if we can get that committee put together or not. If we don't, that of course mean that we have to take up board time like we used to, where we would wordsmith with 12 people during the board to try and get some of these policies through, which, as you know, can be difficult. So enough said on that for the moment. The broadband committee at this time, I'm just going to put that off because it had kind of been shelved for a little bit. And I think, I know some staff has been working on that, as well as some discussions with Gwen and other people on that. And I think I'll talk with staff and decide when to bring that up again and when to, if we need to, get that committee going again. So at this moment, I'm just going to call that done unless anybody has a problem with that.
Well, Britt, this is Tim. One comment about the broadband committee is it was postponed by virtue of the chair, who is not a director anymore. And I think it's time bound, right?
To the end of the year, that's
by
right.
the end of December. So I just caution not to put it off too much further.
All right.
I think it needs, so
that
thanks.
that is noted. Anything else on that? Ooh, I better put my participants window so I can see questions. Okay, no hands up. So we'll go on to, we need to pass some resolutions. Resolutions 2020-08 is the next one. If somebody has what page number that is on our board packet yet? I found it. It's page 65 in the board packet. So if you would turn to that, and it'll have to be edited because the secretary is no longer the person listed on that, but that's a small edit. Who should address this, Jessica? Carl.
Thank you. That would be Carl. Yep.
Carl,
And this
go
is
ahead.
the standard process.
Yeah, so this is the allocation of 2019's margins, operating, non-operating, and what we receive from Tri-State. Want to make sure everyone understands we're not talking about retirement. We're not talking about cash payouts. We're talking about the amount from 2019 that's going to be allocated to the members on the basis set out in our rules and regulations.
And so this money will show up in member equity in future years when we eventually choose to retire it.
Correct.
All right. There also is a correction in the third paragraph. There's a comma there at the end. And then the 2 points where the secretary needs to be changed. So with those changes, I'm looking for a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll make a motion, this is Tim, to approve the resolution with those corrections.
Tim,
Second, Jack.
Tim moves to approve resolution 2020-08 and Jack seconds. Is there any discussion? I see Kohler's hand up. Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to find in paragraph 3 the figures, the actual dollar figures, and I can't get any of my numbers to match them. I looked at the financial statements in January that showed through all of 2019. I looked at the financial statements in the audit report, So I just want to make sure that those are confirmed numbers because I can't come up with those numbers.
Carl, can you address that as to what the financials showed at the end of 2019 compared to these?
The audit report would not match these numbers because the audited financial statements include the results of Fast Track. Those need to be deconsolidated.
So these numbers include the Fast Track margins as well?
No,
The opposite.
The audited financials, those include Fast Track. These do not. This is purely us.
Okay. Kohler, does that seem to make sense? Are they that close?
Yeah, I'll have to look back on it, but I'll trust he knows what's going on because I did not know that. I also couldn't get it to balance to the end of the year financials that were out in the January board packet. So I don't know if those were.
Yeah, I can also address that, Carla. So we closed December, and that's what you see in January. Then we had a couple of adjustments that our auditors recommended that we also pushed into Form 7, and they are mainly classification entries. So what we are retiring ties into what we filed as Form 7.
Thank you. So that's probably the best place I should look next time is Form 7.
Yes.
Thank you.
Which is available in our Google Drive now, I believe. Dan, you have your hand up. Go ahead. No. Okay. Is no more discussion on this. Then I'll look for approval by everybody would unmute and say aye if you approve of this motion to pass this resolution.
Aye.
Anybody who objects, please unmute and say nay. All right, this resolution passes unanimously. Now the next one is resolution 2020-10. Okay, it's on page 66. And there's a little bit of a presentation that goes with it that follows. The first, I will ask for somebody to make a motion to approve this resolution. And if I get a motion in second, then we will discuss it, if that sounds appropriate, including perhaps the presentation materials that Justin is likely to talk about or somebody else.
I'll move to approve that motion. Kohler.
Kohler moves approved 2020-10. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Bob Lynch seconds that. Now let's look at discussion, and that discussion might include if somebody wants to go through that approval presentation, the few slides that we have.
And I will want to make a quick note that we'll also have to change the secretary name on that resolution there as well.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Dan. I've got Ryan joining us here. We sort of thought we'd get to this earlier, and Ryan would have given you a nice tour of Coyote Gulch substation where he was hanging out at the time, but now he's back home. So Ryan, I'll turn this over to you.
Sounds great. Good afternoon. It's nice to be here. This resolution is coming up because as part of Project 500-32, the Animas substation rebuild. We're at a point in the building of it that we need to approve a subcontractor for the construction of the substation rebuild. And so this resolution is to approve the subcontractor bids and review those. So at this point, are we able to share my slides, or what's the next move here to get this information in front of everybody?
Ryan, I think you can probably, just to correct me if I'm wrong, but Ryan, I think you can just talk through the slides. Everybody should have them in their packet as well.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
So
and Ryan,
the
the first question would be is for you to tell us where this is, to remind us in some normal streets, et cetera, where it is. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. That sounds great. So if you can just follow in the slides there, the purpose and description of this project, if we can remember back, it started in 2019. So we've seen it in two capital project budgets already. As a reminder, this is the Animas substation, so it's on the north side of Durango. It's one of 4 substations still within La Plata electric system that has a high side fuse. And so that's an archaic way really to protect a high, expensive piece of equipment, a power transformer. The other main reasons that this project's being addressed is there's 3 of the 5 transmission switches near the substation are actually out of commission due to age and no longer functional. We also have years of erosion and access road that can no longer accommodate a mobile substation. So that's just kind of asking for trouble there. During the wrong outage situation, that would cause some lengthy delays in restoring power during a failure. And the last big one is in West Side, we have 2 pneumatic transmission breakers that are reaching the end of their life as well. So really with this one project, we're taking care of a lot of aging infrastructure.
Okay.
Do you have any questions on that?
Yeah, we've got a Jack Turner with his hand up. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Britt. Just, is this is the substation at the base of the Animas Mountain Trailhead, Ryan?
That's correct.
Okay. Just to follow up on Britt's question. Thanks.
Yeah.
John, go ahead. John Lee.
Yeah, Ryan, how does this proposal fit into the current budget? Since it's already going on and this is a subcontractor for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was brought up in the capital projects budget in 2019 and for the 2020 budget. And so really this isn't an add-on at all. This is simply just the board getting a chance to review the subcontractors as our bylaws state.
So the project in totality already has this figured into it as a line, as part of that line?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Ryan, if I can add to it too. So the reason why we're bringing this here to you today is because in policy, which one is it? 103, I believe, with the executive officer's duties, it says anytime we have contracts for construction in excess of $250,000, we have to submit that to the board for approval. So that's, although you've approved the project, this is why we're in front of you here today, is to approve this bid here. Go ahead, Ryan.
Good point. Thank you for that clarification, Dan. Do we have any questions there?
Yeah, Joe Lewandowski. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just curious, 2 questions. Pretty popular trailhead there. Just wondering when construction would start and if it's going to interrupt access to the trail.
That's a great question. So we went through permitting last month with La Plata County, and we've been working closely with Durango Parks and Rec as well. So we'll close the access at certain times and we'll give them notice, and they're willing to work with us on reroutes and making that work for the public. In addition, I know Hillary's been wrapped up in it as well. So we'll include a bunch of public releases as well to try and notify the public.
And when will the work actually start?
So per the contract, it would start within 30 days of signing it. So I'm hoping to get that moving today if you guys choose so. And then the project must be complete within 120 days of starting it. So it's swift, but it is right middle of summer.
Okay. And then my other question, and maybe this goes to what Jessica was talking about earlier. It's the low bid, pretty big spread between the high bid and the low bid. Could you just tell us a little bit about, how you evaluated that, kind of going into this kind of new look at these things?
Yes, sir. You're running my punchline here, but I'd love to dig into that. So when we evaluated the bid, good call on noticing it was the low bid. But with this subcontractor, we do have a history with them and knowing that they're a positive work experience. We also were able to go line by line throughout all the line items and compare it to engineering estimates that we developed before we got the bids in. So I do agree that the bids did have a significant amount of deviation between them. But I do believe we have a strong subcontractor here that will not push a lot of change orders.
Okay, Tim, go ahead.
This wouldn't affect my vote, but I'm just curious, Ryan, if there's any fiber or broadband into this substation, or will that be part of this construction? Anything along those lines?
So we brought fiber into this substation 2 years ago, and that will simply maintain and stay. So there's no effect adding or subtracting it. It's going to be staying.
Great, thanks.
Okay, looks like the discussion's over. So I'm going to ask all those who are in favor of this motion to unmute and say aye at this time. Go ahead.
Aye.
Aye.
Any who are not in favor of this motion, please unmute and say nay. This motion is passed unanimously. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Britt, this is Jack. I did have a follow-up question. It is really kind of irrelevant, but if I may,
Go ahead,
Ryan.
Jack. I didn't, yeah.
That's right. No worries. That didn't affect my vote. And somehow my hang went down anyway. But this substation was hit by lightning a couple years ago, wasn't it? If I'm not mistaken, did that have an impact on the?
Yeah, so we suspect a lightning strike occurred a little bit north of there, but this would allow additional protection if that were to occur again. But it is not having effect. It did not damage any equipment in the substation.
But it would. But then you're saying it would add additional protection if it with lightning. So that was good to know, right?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good. Let's go on to resolution 2020-11. This is on page 73 of your board packet. This is for changes during this pandemic, the temporary suspension of the LPEA rules and regulations regarding collections. Let's again, if we can, get a motion to pass this and or motion to pass it in a second, and then we'll go into discussion. May I have a motion at this time?
Yeah, this is Jack. I move to approve resolution 2020-11.
A second?
Rachel second.
Okay, we have Jack moving to approve resolution 2020-11, and Rachel has seconded that. Now I'm looking for any questions or discussion, but first I'll ask staff if they want to comment on this. Jessica?
Yeah, I will kick it over to Hillary, but I think this was a good process. I'm kind of going to give you a bigger perspective of this as why we're bringing this to you is that in our newfound leadership principles and our code of excellence, we really wanted to get more perspective from folks on the front line about where they thought we could help our community. And in digging through all the mechanics of allowing for more flexibility for our membership to pay their bills over a certain amount of time, our frontline staff realized that we were somewhat limited in some of our current regulations and policies. So this is just a really great testament where we had a lot of the CSRs involved in this in Carl's group, and they came up with a list of solutions. And this is one of the fixes we think are necessary, enable to us to allow more flexibility for our members. So I'll let Hillary go ahead and give you more of the details.
Yeah, thank you for that description, Jessica. As she said, we had a lot of the people who will be responsible for implementing these rules take part in the crafting of them, which I think is very important. Basically, what we're proposing in this resolution is the temporary suspension of 4 different items that are currently in our rules and regulations. The first one is in regard to installment agreements. And installment agreements are basically where we get our customers on a payment plan for what they owe, and we give them a certain number of months to be able to pay that off. So the first item is that we currently only allow installment agreements to residential accounts. Given the deep impact of COVID on businesses, we would like to extend the option of installment agreements to commercial accounts as well. So that is the first amendment. The second would be to give us more flexibility in paying off those amounts in arrears. We'd like to extend the maximum time period for those installment agreements from 6 months to 12 months. The third item is all funds included in any installment arrangements are currently subject to a 1% interest charge. We propose to remove that interest charge. And then the fourth item has to do with the reimbursement of residential deposits. So currently residential deposits are held for 12 months and if a customer has good credit with us, they are refunded back at that time. As a sort of out of the box thinking around how we could help our customers, we propose to allow the early refunding of residential deposits on a case-by-case basis when circumstances warrant. This would really be sort of the last tool in the arsenal. We would only do this if our customers had a really good payment history with us before COVID. This would just be the final thing that might be able to help them dig themselves out of the hole that they're in, but it would be very judiciously employed. So those are the four things we're proposing, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have quite a slew of questions, and I will preface that by saying, geez, it's getting to be 5 o'clock, guys. Anyhow, Kirsten, you're first on the line. Let's go.
Quick, I am recusing myself on this vote. All of us have conflicts because we're members, and sometimes we have to vote, for raising our own rates and such. That happens all the time. I'm a little too interested in this because I'm also a small commercial, so I just as soon not participate in this. Thank you.
Okay, noted and appreciated. Kohler, would you go ahead, please?
Thank you. I have two things. On the, it's the fourth whereas. It talks about the providing the circumstances for refunding member deposits. It doesn't have a time thing in there, so can we add the word early at the very end? So it would read member deposits on residential accounts early for your consideration. And then also in the first, be it further resolved, the last sentence, the staff shall be responsible for establishing procedures and evaluating requests on a case-to-case basis. I think that, to me, that leaves it open that the evaluating request is a little bit separate from establishing procedures. And I feel that individuals' behavior changes when they're under financial stress. So I think it needs to be a little clearer. So I'd like you to consider changing the and evaluating to evaluate. So it would read, staff shall be responsible for establishing procedures to evaluate requests on a case-to-case basis. And that's my two requests to be considered, please.
And is it you, Hillary, who I would ask to say if those two requests change things in any substantive way, or would work okay?
That works for the process we had envisioned. I think that's a bit clearer even.
Yes, I think those sound real good. And is Karis the one who will be correcting this before it goes to be signed? Then of course you need to switch Gwen's name out as well. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. In the let's see, where is it? The final, be it further resolved. At the end of that first long sentence, where it says, the rules and regulations will remain and continue in full force and effect until modified by subsequent resolution of the LPEA Board of Directors, I would like to add at the end of that, or within 12 months, whichever is earlier. I don't like open-ended authorizations.
I'm also okay with that. We originally were wondering whether this should be temporary or not, but just because we're so uncertain about the length of this COVID, we decided to keep it temporary, but I think that solution works.
Well, if it's temporary, I think we should put an end date on it so it doesn't just go on.
Linger.
We'll never remember a year from now. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, go ahead.
I assume this has been covered, but just to check in, worst case scenario, does this impact, if you thought through worst case scenario in terms of folks that are going into arrears, are we good with cash flow and all of those things if we're putting people on repayment plans?
Yes, that's something that Carl has been paying very, very close attention to. We're running reports on a weekly basis that keep track of our arrears and how they're standing at 30, 60, and 90 days. So we are very much keeping those things in mind. But so far, we're still in a pretty good position considering.
Okay. John Lee, would you go ahead?
Yeah, mine is similar to Tim's, but we start out calling it a temporary suspension. And then the second to last sentence, like Tim said, it goes on forever. There isn't an end date. And so I think this isn't a temporary suspension the way this is written. One of those two needs to change. It's either a suspension of the rule and regulation in collections or not until modified by subsequent resolution, because that's every resolution is going to be modified some other time to unmodify it. So I think that needs to be more specified.
So John, if we were to do a proposal that regulations will remain and continue in full force and effect until modified by subsequent resolution of the board of directors or within or after 12 months, whichever is sooner, would that sort of address your concern there?
Yeah, if it doesn't even have to say, subsequent resolutions. If it said within 12 months, we heard earlier today that might be somebody else's model saying there's going to be an outbreak in August and something's going to continue. So if we run it out long enough to address the people who you feel might be affected by this, by not paying their bills because they haven't gotten back to work or whatever the situation is, yeah, have a date on it, then I guess it's a temporary suspension. Because otherwise we would have to come back into this and have a resolution to get rid of 2011.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I think we're straight on that. Joe, would you go ahead?
And I don't know, I might be jumping ahead. So if you can't answer this at this time, it's not a problem. But I'm just looking at kind of the mechanics of this thing. So someone, 3 months behind, they owe $400. How are you looking at that payment plan? Is it to, spread those payments out over another 12 months? And does that make sense? Is there any?
Yeah, and we're still very much in the thick of this, and we're not the only ones. So really the entire NISC community is talking about how they're going to handle these accounts that have gone into arrears. What's being discussed right now is that at the point where the moratorium for disconnects is lifted, NISC is proposing that any amount in arrears be actually moved into a miscellaneous charges bucket. So it is sort of separate from their monthly bill bucket. So just to use an example, let's say that starting from March until whenever the disconnect policy is lifted, you accrue $400 that you owe to LPEA. Once we flip the switch and are reinstituting our disconnects, that 400 owed will be parsed out into a different bucket. And then everything from there forward will start in a new balance. What that does is that makes sure that all of a sudden on a certain day, you don't just receive a disconnect notice because you've racked up all these charges. If you were then to rack up additional charges after that, you would start to get the disconnects. But for that amount that was accrued during COVID, that would be separate. It's then the CSRs would be responsible for being in touch with every one of those accounts to set up specialized repayment plans. So it might be that a customer is paying their monthly bill each month and $50 additional that goes into the other bucket. So that is what's being proposed by NISC at the moment, and it has quite a lot of support from other utilities as well.
Quick, and NISC is?
Apologies, that is our billing system.
Oh, okay, all right. And I guess maybe when it gets worked out, when it gets worked out, it'd be nice just to see an example, just so we have that. A couple of people have asked me how it's going to work, and so thanks.
Okay, does anybody recall what the acronym NISC stands for?
National
Information Services Cooperative.
Thank you, Carl.
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, President Bassett, as the one who moved to approve this resolution, I'm okay with the changes that have been discussed to that resolution.
All right, that sounds real good. And I guess for formality, I should ask the seconder if they approve these suggested changes. We all forgot who seconded it already. I think it was Rachel.
I think that was
actually. I'm not...
I think it was me. Yes, I'm on board with the changes.
All right, then I'd like to see if we could pass this resolution now. So all those in favor of passing it at this time, would you unmute and say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any who
Aye.
are opposed to passing this, would you unmute and say nay? Okay, this resolution has passed unanimously. Good work. Now we're going on to the Election Supervisory Committee Update Report. That is on, let's see, there it is, page 76 of 176. The Election Supervisory Committee met and created a report which everybody failed miserably on their contribution reports. I assume that's all been cleaned up. Jessica, I'll ask you who on staff can report on this, if anybody.
And I believe that would be Shay. Is that right, Shay?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. So we included a copy of the minutes from the meeting. Following that meeting, I sent emails out as directed by the ESC. All of the candidates were very quick to send in amended reports, and those amended reports are published on the website. So no problems there. The election actually went fairly smoothly, and we'll have an opportunity to get together with the ESC and have a rundown as to what worked, what didn't work this year. As you'll recall, what we do is kind of have an after action report following the election, and then the ESC has suggestions for the board as how to continue to improve the process. And I think we're getting together next week to do that. The other thing that we'll do is get together to review the final campaign contribution reports. And following that, at the June meeting, you'll receive both a full report from the board on the initial and final campaign contribution reports, and the after action report as far as suggestions from the ESC. So unless anybody has any questions, I think that overall it ended up going pretty well considering we're in the middle of COVID.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions. Rachel, would you go ahead?
Sure, this is just one, it's actually not a question, but a request. I know we're looking at 5 o'clock, and so for all the reports moving forward, since we've all had the packet, can we just, unless maybe we don't, this isn't a thing on Shay, that's okay with beforehand, but unless there's questions or any side notes, can we move through things kind of quickly?
Yes, I hear you in the suggestion, which I would stick with unless somebody would disagree, is when we get to the direct reports will just be said they are in the packet for us to read and review at our leisure. And of course, we can always use email to ask specific questions of the person who wrote the report. But let's go ahead with the Election Supervisory Committee. Questions, and Kirsten, you're up next.
Yeah, this is back on 2011. You had said that it was unanimous. I would like to make sure you put me in as recused.
Oh, thank you very much. How quickly we forget. Karis, for the minutes, did you get it that it was unanimous? I shouldn't say unanimous. It was 11 in favor and 1 recused, and it was Kirsten Skeen recused. Karis, have you got that?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Tim, go ahead.
Thanks. We're talking about the ESC report. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So, I was just on the website, and the final this financial disclosure reports are not on it. I could not find them.
They're not fully due yet. They're due 10 days after the election, so we have a couple, but not all of them.
All right, because I thought you said they were all up there, but
No.
I'm staying corrected. So,
okay.
On that piece. And I don't mean to complain, but I had to chase a lot of these reports to be posted on the website throughout this election. And I hope that we will improve that in the future. there's policies that we passed that for ballot returns as well as financial disclosure reports. And I don't feel like we followed that very carefully this time. I think that's totally understandable and excusable because there's a lot of different players in this election and also a totally different landscape than before having to do with this COVID crisis. But I think it's an opportunity for improvement. So
and I will actually apologize and take full responsibility for that. There were a lot of moving pieces around this election. And just because of the things that happened as I came in, I wasn't fully able to digest all of the steps throughout the process. I did take notes throughout of all the things that do need to be done in the full process, and we'll do better next year.
You know, just one last thing, point of information is, you know, several of my members tried hard to find this information on the website. I tried as well. I had to send the direct links to that. You know, what, in my mind, during the election itself, this should be on the front page as a link that you can get right to it. I couldn't, you know, anyway, I think there's room here for us to improve. I'm not trying to complain about.
And I 100% agree. Actually, I would ask you guys to watch the website in June. We didn't get to talk about this during my section, but the website right now is on a very strong platform. It's on a Drupal platform that we're given for free with our membership to Touchstone. There are a lot of possibilities within that that have not been realized. We have no SEO, which is search engine optimization, on our site. We also have a really messy mix of menus that make finding things impossible. That combined with the lack of SEO make that search functionality really limited. So we are aware of the shortcomings, but it is not the platform, it's us. So I'm going to be working a lot over the month of June and July to simplify the menu, make the pages a lot more user-friendly from what you see just immediately on the screen, have the information in there organized a lot better, and do a full content overhaul as well. So I fully agree, Tim. It's also been a frustration of mine, and we're getting there.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
Appreciate that. Dan Huntington?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on the annual meeting. Just some comments that I've been getting from members that logged in. They were very, very disappointed in the direct question that came in about the total cost of the tri-state investigation of getting a buyout cost. And my calculations are for over $700,000 came out this first quarter, and had a document in December that just included the two firms that did the investigations for us, the consultants, of $400,000, and that doesn't include the director's expenses on that investigation committee. So anyway, I think our members deserve an answer to that question, and I hope it comes out in a.
We were going to put questions on the website and answer them. Would there be changes to the text that are yet to be put out there, or have they already been put out there? From the annual meeting, there were like 4 questions. I guess who
they are. I believe we've gotten 2 or 3 of them already on the fact checker.
Okay.
And as far as the answer to the question on the finances, Jessica, I don't know if you want to address that one. It's not currently on the fact checker yet.
Yeah, so Dan, you're right. This is actually timing issue. We have no problem posting what we've spent, but our attorney said we shall not during the PUC case, and we wanted to respect their decision to say you need to wait on posting that because they felt that information could be used against us. And I don't know all the details, but it was used against DMEA in their case. And so there's some case precedents for that. So I think we, to put our best foot forward for our membership, we needed to, you know, listen to the attorneys and what they said. But Dan, to your point, yeah, we can do more of a detailed analysis on what has been spent, even with the previous reports that have been done, and post that. I think that would probably be important. And also, though, I would like to post the timeline of the whole, when we started this tri-state discussion, because this has been going on for quite some time, just to show all the different things that we have been doing and we have been proposing to tri-state for changes. I think that's important for the membership to see too. I'm just trying to get the sign off from the attorneys to go ahead and post that as well.
Okay, well, that's going to be after the decision's been made and all the appeals are over with and all of that, which could be a year from now.
I honestly don't think it's going to take that long. I think it was probably just during this one court case, just this week. But I'll double check with the attorneys and ask them.
Yeah, what about the appeals?
I don't know if it comes into play with the appeals, but again, I'll ask the attorneys and see what they think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment, since I answered that question that way, that I understand the question. I understand people's frustration. We were asked to be general and not give specific numbers. And my understanding, and Jessica will find out exactly, but because the hearing is going on this week exactly, to not put those numbers out there to be used against us. But I feel strongly that we need to have a full accounting at an appropriate point. And I don't think, in my mind, it's not a year from now. It's some appropriate time this year that we have a full accounting of what we've spent. So I'll support that.
Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, can we just cite that these numbers are coming? Here's our game plan to give numbers and a timeline. However, we have been advised by our attorneys right now in the middle of an active case not to disclose that information. Just so, because to Dan's point, right, people are wondering why this big secret. And I think is there any compromise to us if we can just explain this is at the advice of our lawyers? It's not because we're hiding anything.
Yes, we're able to hear Jessica or Rachel's suggestion is simply on the website, and part of answering that question, we explain why the numbers aren't being put out there. It was on the advice of our attorneys during this case.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can do that.
That sounds good. Is there anything? Oh, I see Holly. Holly, you've got, go ahead.
I'm trying to recall that particular vote. To Dan's point, did we not also agree to put it in Colorado Country Life?
The questions.
We did. We agreed that we would put
thank you.
a synopsis with a link to the website for a more full overview. So unfortunately, we already missed the submission deadline for the June edition, but we'll get that into the July edition.
All right. Next on the agenda then is we're not going to have any director travel requests. I'm not going to allow any directors to travel anyway. Sorry about that. So we can go on the directors. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a point that the CREA Biannual Energy Innovation Summit has become virtual, and that will be offered virtually, and the Energy Innovation Summit will be held as a series of webinars.
All right. I'm sure we'll get more information from that from CREA as the time gets closer then.
And just to follow up, I think you said you're not going to approve any travel.
I just figured nobody is traveling. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But there's all virtual classes that are being offered. Kirsten sent out a list. Joe mentioned it. CREA is going virtual. And regarding what, Carl was speaking to, about being really disciplined. I don't know if we want to have a conversation about, suspending our budget or whatnot for training or classes. I think we need to have some clarity around that. I mean, we won't be physically traveling, but there's still opportunity to pay tuition to go do some classes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're right. That would be something that would still be covered under, we don't have another place for director education other than under these sorts of items. So it would be addressed now. So yes, Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, to that point, I'm interested in that first class. I get that I can put it off for a few months, but I'm 2 years in and I still haven't done all my basic training, and I would like to. And Bob, that one that is on the NRECA, I think that's the one that's holding you back from being fully certified too. So we should both go for it. It's not even available in May anymore. That already happened, but maybe come July or something. I'd certainly like to be interested.
So that's a request from Kirsten to take an online class from NRECA. And what was the cost of that class? 500, did you say? Not catching Kirsten.
It's almost 600. It's like 590, something like that. It's all of $100 cheaper than showing up.
And Bob, Kirsten has asked you or suggested that you do that. What's your thought on that?
I'd have to look at that time, and I'll be interested, but I'll confirm later if that's going to work for me time-wise.
All right. And go ahead, Tim.
If you do an online class, I think even if you attend a class that's, you travel to, there's a per diem cost as well, I think. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's a factor in the cost of an online class. If we normally pay per diem for someone who attends a class.
Yeah, my first thought would be that if they're at home, my first thought would be that we wouldn't be paying the per diem. Would anybody disagree with that?
Yes, because you're using the time. It's a time thing.
We don't normally pay like if we have a full-time meeting, like today, you get a certain amount. If we have a half-time meeting, you get a certain amount. But if we're going to classes, do we normally pay that?
It's a question.
Yeah. We have.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just gonna say I think we do pay per diem, and then I know for me, I have to take off work, so that's a deduction from my income.
Okay, that makes sense. So for those who are having to take time off to take a class, it's certainly appropriate that there would be some per diem paid. For those who don't, I would leave it up to them, I guess, but certainly the class itself should be paid. Is there any more related to director travel or education requests? Jack, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Britt, it was more reflective on, we actually have policy. I think you gave a good out with making it optional, but we do have policy, and I don't know if we want to dive into that or Shay can reference it, but it does speak to paying per diem for trainings and conferences and whatnot. So,
okay.
But it would be an option of the director not to accept that, but our policy says we do pay that.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you. I believe that if a director is going to travel or spend some money, we normally give them approval to do that as a board. Occasionally, we don't give approval if somebody is asking for something, but not very often. So we have, I'm now going to look for approval for the two requests that have been made for online courses, one possibility and one for sure. Would anybody move for that approval?
I'll make a motion. This is Tim to approve that. Those two requests.
Looking for a second.
Second by Kohler.
Second by Kohler. Any more discussion? All those in favor of approving these two travel requests?
Britt, I do. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah. So I know I want to make sure that the other directors know, the new ones, that we've reduced our training budget to from $7,500 to $4,000. And I'm going back again, so that's an important key. I would like to ask, I wonder if we need to like relook at that regarding Carl's input about the being really disciplined, and if we need, and because we're not having to travel, we're taking classes, which is like a fraction of what those expenses are. If we should I would like to relook at that budget training and make it more realistic to what we're dealing with today. Does it make sense?
Well, we never have to, there's no penalty in going under the budget. Certainly we can do that. So that you don't have to reduce it to go underneath it. But it's certainly something that could be added to the agenda next month if we choose to look at it again. And I'll speak to the agenda as we finish up here and how we're going to deal with that going forward. So we're now looking, we've got a motion on the table to approve those student expenses. All who are in favor of that would please unmute and say aye at this time.
Aye.
Aye. Any who oppose these two expenses would unmute and say nay at this time. Okay, those things are approved. All right, the next thing on the list is the actual approval of expenses that we've already occurred, including today's meeting. And our treasurer usually tells us what those are, and then we approve those. So Tim, if you'd go.
All right, thank you. Bear with me as I pick up all these little windows of information. So today, every board director is attending for a full day. And it looks like online, everyone filled out their time and attendance sheet. So I think I and Karis both thank you very much for that. Then there's the time and attendance for the Finance and Audit Committee, which was held as a Zoom meeting from 2 to 5 p.m. on May 14th. So it's a half day, and that is for Director Wheeler, for Director Huntington, Director Unger, Director Bassett. Then I have an expense report for Director Lewandowski for 2 roundup board meetings, one in the end of April, the other here in May. Each of those is a half day of per diem, 125 each for a total of 250. For the Director Metzler was the same. She did those same 2 roundup meetings through Zoom for those 2 half days, also a total of 250. We have Director Landis for the 4-Corps board meeting and an emergency board meeting. It says here 2 half days at 125 for a total of 250. And I believe there's one more, Director Turner, 2 half days. It looks like for CREA board meeting, Zoom, and that makes a total of 250. Those are all the ones that I have a record of. Does anybody think that I missed anything for anyone?
Yes, Tim, John Lee, Sue and I had.
You're right. Yes, you're right. I have that one here, and I think I just closed it by mistake. I'm sorry. So yes, I believe that was a half day, right, for each of you, less than 4 hours.
It was a half day for Sue and a full day for, or more than those hours for me.
Okay, so for you, it'd be 200 per diem, and Sue would be 125. That was director orientation this week, I believe. And you did send something to me. I apologize. I didn't bring that up. So, and thanks for the reminder, John. So is that anyone else? Anybody else that I might have missed along the way here? All right, that's it then.
All right, Tim, thank you for providing that list of expenses. I'm looking for a motion to approve that list of director expenses.
I'll move to approve the expenses that Tim just presented.
This is
Bob?
Jack.
Okay, we've got Bob moving to approve and Jack seconding it. Any more discussion? All those in favor of approving these expenses, please unmute and say aye at this time.
Aye.
Aye.
Any who disapprove, please unmute and say nay at this time. Okay, we're unanimously approve those expenses. Thank you so much, Tim. Now we go on to the attorney report. Shay, if you would.
Thank you. So the attorney report is in the packet. I'll be happy to take questions about that, but there are a couple of things that I just needed to highlight quickly. And one of those was that I assisted in an executive committee meeting looking to review or looking to approve a resolution to allow LPEA to take PPP loan funding. I believe that there was, after that resolution was approved, there were some questions as to whether or not co-ops could actually be eligible for the program and some uncertainty regarding that. That uncertainty has since been cleared up, and so La Plata is again looking to take some PPP loan funds for the purpose of helping in these uncertain times. And I believe that the amount that they're looking to take is less now than what was originally considered. And Jessica may have some more information about that, but that is something that was discussed by the executive committee. And if there's anybody that has questions about that, now would be an appropriate time to talk about that. And sorry, probably need to pause and make sure Jessica doesn't have anything else to say about that.
No, I would just say that, you know, we've been following it closely. I know there's some differences of opinion about whether to take the PPP funds. We've been, you know, working a lot with the co-ops in Colorado, nationally. I even reached out to some local small businesses here in Durango to get their input and advice. We even talked to our auditor to see what they thought, because we don't want to do this if we don't really need it. And so Carl's been really looking through to see, do we need this? And is it our responsibility to protect our membership? So he feels that in talking to other cooperatives and again, our auditor and others, that, you know, it's probably more responsible for us to do that because we are under collecting right now. Carl told you that. And we don't want to pass those costs on to additional membership. So I'm thinking that it would be good for us to go ahead and go back to the executive committee and have that discussion one more time. We can proceed with it, but you know, this is a kind of a difficult topic.
And if you would help me remember, if we did have quite a discussion over this, and we're convinced our fiduciary duty said that we should at least put our CEO and CFO in position to apply for these funds should they deem it necessary. Was that passed by the full board, you know, last month? Or is this just been an executive committee authorization to the CEO?
This was just an executive committee authorization. The reason that it went to the executive committee instead of the full board was the timing. And so whenever La Plata was originally looking at applying for this loan, they were being told by their lender that they needed to get an application in and get a resolution passed within a matter of days. And it wouldn't have provided sufficient time to take it to the full board. And so because it was an emergency basis situation, the executive committee considered it.
Okay, and from hearing what Jessica said, she says at this time there's still a possibility that LPEA would apply for this before the next board meeting.
And it's my understanding that the current resolution as it sets is sufficient for that purpose, that the bank will accept that resolution, and Jessica has authority through that resolution to move forward based on that.
So as long as they take money less than we authorize, there actually is no action that we need to take unless Jessica would want us to take more action in some way.
That's correct. And the only other thing would be is if the board as a whole disagrees with the decision that the executive committee took, then the board as a whole could address that through appropriate motion. But as long as you are not wanting to do that, then there's nothing further that needs to be done.
All right, then it sounds to me, board, that there's a likelihood this action might occur before the next board meeting. So if you don't agree with it vigorously and want to do something about it, now would be the time. I have a couple of hands up. Jack, you're first. Go ahead.
Thanks, President Bassett. I'm getting used to saying that. How
Well,
does it feel?
You don't have to.
A couple questions. One, just to follow the tracking of what happened last time, it was based on acknowledgement of hardship and that we decide not to pursue it because of that risk. And somehow that seems like that. So that's just, I guess, to Jessica or to the executive committee, that risk seems to be alleviated. That's the first question. The second question is, as the CREA rep, and I know CREA and NRECA are working with at the national level, getting co-ops covered under the PPP. Is that something that I'm kind of feeling like I need to be part of that discussion just so I can carry it forward as CREA? And I just would like some feedback there. So those two questions.
Jessica, could you address that?
Sure, Jack, so, oh, yeah, go ahead, Carl.
On the risk part, anyway, I can definitely speak to that. New guidance was coming out of the Small Business Administration every day. We received guidance that if you apply for a loan under $2 million, then it is accepted that you have applied in good faith and that your economic uncertainty, which we certainly do have, would not be subject to review or audit. So we had originally applied for a number more than that. That included a notional, a notional amount for health insurance. As you may well know, we don't actually pay a health insurance provider. We self-insure. So when an employee makes a claim, we pay for it. So that was a very difficult number to quantify, and that was the subject of most of the back and forth I had with the Bank of Colorado. I spoke to BKD, Rob, who you met, who is our audit partner, and Thad, who is a specialist tax partner and has been their go-to guy on PPP. I said, if I take that out, because if someone asked me to quantify it, that would be very difficult. I'd be under 2 million. And do you think that's wise and makes sense? And they said, absolutely. You probably should have done that to start with. Well, fair enough, but I accept that. So the risk is gone in terms of whether we would be audited or held accountable for it. Held accountable is the wrong word. We have to meet the requirements of the PPP loan, which means we keep all our people working, which is our full intention. If we don't keep them working, we have to pay it back. No harm, no foul. But we fully, obviously, the plan is we are not laying people off.
And Jack, to be clear, the executive committee did authorize staff to go take the loan out. There was certainly initially a lot of argument against doing that because there was the concern that there are other people who are in a position where they would need the money more. But in a sense, it wasn't necessarily a competition, and it wouldn't be a competition against other people in our community. It perhaps would be across the country. And if this would be something that could help our community, eventually we were convinced that it would be a good idea to at least give them this authorization. Kirsten, your hand is up if you'd go next.
Yes, sir. This was a resolution by the executive committee, and I think it is important since we have the opportunity to go ahead and ratify it. So I would move that we ratify the resolution of the executive committee to pursue, if needed and if possible, the PPP.
All right, we have a motion to accept that staff would go ahead with this. Is there a second?
I second.
Jack seconds it. Now we have a motion and a second on the table regarding, in a sense, ratifying the executive committee's decision. Is there any discussion on this? Carl, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Too many buttons. I just Not a question, just to clarify the exact situation. If we want it, we can have it. That's already settled. I'm not saying the money's already coming and I can't stop it, but if we want it, we can have it. And also the SBA put out very specific language saying that electric cooperatives were eligible. So I just wanted to make that clear that everybody knew that.
One other clarification, simply applying for it doesn't guarantee that we're going to get it, does it?
Yeah, we've already been approved, but there is the administrative part where you close it. We were at this stage before the initial application.
Okay, appreciate that then. We're in good shape if we choose to get it. Rachel, go ahead.
Two quick questions. One, do we have a copy of the resolution? I can't remember if it was a synopsis that got sent out in the email or the actual resolution.
Yes, the resolution was emailed by Bob following the meeting. And so if you look for an email from him dated 4/29.
Perfect.
But Shay, did that, sorry. I think there's one slight change in the resolution. Shay, does that say 2.5 million? Because we're not going after that amount of funding.
It does say 2.5, but my recollection was that that was the amount that you were initially looking to borrow. Since that's changed, the bank is still willing to accept this resolution as being authorization because you're looking to borrow less.
Yes, we can make it less. And that's resolution 2020-09, just for clarity. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the second question, so with these SBA PPP loans, right, is 75%. There's basically, it's either a loan or a grant depending on how you use it, is my understanding. I don't know for co-ops, but I know for nonprofits and small business. And, you know, given the numbers you're talking about, is this an opportunity? It's basically displacing some of our fixed costs, potentially, is what I'm understanding it to be. Potentially, if we're basically using it to pay down payroll and some healthcare things. And so I'm just thinking about, you know, we have members that are potentially under financial stress. We're looking at rate increase. Do all these things, can they all tie together somehow and we pass on the release to our members?
Carl, could you answer that? But in general, anytime we bring in some money that keeps us from having to do something else, it will directly affect members in one way or another. Carl, could you more fully answer Rachel's question?
Yeah, absolutely. We would use these funds, if authorized, to make payroll for the allotted period, the 10-week period. And that's money we don't have to take out of our general fund. So, you know, the whole point of the program is that it's tied to payroll. So we have to use those funds for payroll, and that's exactly how I intend to do it. But you're quite right, everything works together, and that leaves us more money in our general fund. That leaves us more money to make sure that we can be flexible with the membership and make other decisions if necessary, if this pandemic and the lockdown continues longer than we are all hoping that it will. So yes, is the short answer, but.
And the other part of her question, was it a grant or is it a loan, depending on how it's used? In our case, which would it be?
It would be a grant.
Okay.
Sorry, grant. Let me say it in American.
Grant. Thank you. Rachel, anything else?
Yeah, just a follow-up on that. If my logic is flawed here, of course, call that out. But because our rate increase is slated to go into effect in July, so would we still have a chance in June? Let's say this PPP comes in, and basically I'm wondering if it's worth analyzing the displacement of funds, since it is a grant, to see if it's feasible or makes sense to stave off a rate increase if the COVID situation and what we're seeing in our community warrants it. So basically, it's a question, is this worth bringing back to the table for a potential discussion in June to see if we receive these
For-
funds if it changes our situation enough that, and if the context of our community is such that we might want to use it to push back rates.
So the suggestion and thought is, if we receive these funds, should we consider delaying the rate increase by another month or something like that? Carl?
I think that's a question for you guys to vote on. I would point out that we've already deferred $1 million worth of revenue. So with that in mind, that's a decision. If someone wants to bring forward a resolution on that, then they're welcome to do so. I think it's up to you.
All right, this could become an agenda item for next month if that is the will of some of the people who would deal with that. And I'll talk to you about getting on the agenda again as we finish stuff up. So let me keep going here. Caller, go ahead.
Sorry, Britt, can I just conclude? Sorry,
Yes.
Carla. Just, I would think if we deferred another 3 months, then it's all gone, and there's no other opportunities in terms of payment plans and write-offs or whatever we may be looking at. So, in my opinion, that's not what I would do. But I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Caller?
So I'm not that familiar with grants, but with the grant, can you draw as you need it? And would we do that? Or is it just take it all or nothing?
Are you saying can we repay it if we choose to?
No, is it
No,
a one
not
lump sum or drawn at a rate on a slow basis?
So if we have a
Oh,
cap
I'm
of
sorry.
$1.5 million, but we only think we need 500,000 right now and draw it as we need it, or do we have to take the full $1.5 million or whatever our cap is? I'm not that convinced.
So we get authorized for, it's just under 2 million, it's like 1.95. And it would be put in a separate account that we wouldn't be writing checks from. And we would draw from it every 2 weeks to cover payroll until it was exhausted.
So we would take the whole amount and put it in
Yes.
there. Thank you.
All right. Jack, would you unmute and go ahead?
Yeah, a couple points. I want to underscore what you said, President Bassett, that this isn't a competition and that it's money coming into our community, to our employees who are part of our community and supporting our community. So I support the PPP. I also, I guess to add to part of Rachel's question is, I don't hear from Carl that I hear from Carl a bit of stress. I mean, we're doing okay, but there's a stress around the financial, and that a little bit will help, but it's in that window of uncertainty that it gives us a little bit more of security, but it's not enough that we're in a place of abundance that we can. It would hurt the organization to extend the rating, the increase to a different time. I'm okay with putting on the agenda, but I just keep hearing this overlying tone of like, where's like discipline, and we need to be certainly attentive and mindful that we're in a critical time right now in the financial part and managing this organization.
All right. Kirsten, would you go ahead?
Thank you. Two things to consider about the PPP is the timing is important because you have an 8-week clock once you start on it. So it's probably good that it's been delayed to this point. You want to kind of space it out as long as you can. The way I look at the PPP is it's a way of bringing federal money into the community. We have to use it for payroll, but it means that we're not using our own money for payroll, which means we'll now have $2 million to spend on our other stuff. I'm totally in Rachel's camp here on let's make sure we further get that out into the community, and whether we do that by delaying our our rate increase, or we do it by, I don't know what, I'd like to make sure that that $2 million that we are not, in effect, spending on payroll, that we spend it on getting this federal money out further into the community.
Okay, John, if you would unmute and go ahead.
So I understand the motion before us is to ratify what the executive committee has already done in the action that executives have taken and have the authorization to do, but I don't have access to that to see it or read it. But I guess, you know, at worst case, I would abstain from it, but I have no frame of reference other than us talking about some good ideas or action that has already been authorized.
Yes, we would need to email you that resolution that was in that mail that Bob sent out in 429. Does anybody have that in front of them where they can do that now?
I do, and I'm sending it to the two of them. I apologize. I forgot about that.
Okay.
And Britt, I can't raise my hand because I'm a host, so if you don't mind, I did want to clarify one point for Kohler, because it was a good question about taking all the money or not. And I was reminded that any excess funds become margins and go back to the members. So if we're wrong and don't need that much money, then the members get those funds through capital credits.
All right. And John and Sue, have you received that email yet so that you would be prepared to vote on this?
I will look to see if I've received it, but I can't find my little raise my hand button on here. So can I go ahead and speak?
Yes.
Okay. I'm kind of like John. I feel like we're behind the curveball here and not knowing what was already discussed or what the executive committee decided. I guess my first reaction is, even though it's money coming into our community, we as taxpayers end up paying for it in the end when COVID is over. So personally, I would probably like to just see us as La Plata Electric tighten our belt and not take the money, and therefore give that money to other communities or other businesses around the country that really need it worse than we do as a co-op.
Okay. And John, have you got the email yet? Are you prepared?
Yes, I've got it. And, you know, other than the same thing we've been talking about, the secretary's name being changed and then the dollar amount being changed.
Well, the dollar amount actually can remain the same so long as it doesn't go above that. We wouldn't have to change that. Okay, I've got Kirsten, and then we should probably wrap this up. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, hey, Jessica, when you say that it goes into capital credits, yeah, but those don't get paid for several years. So I'd still like to try to get it put into some more current programs.
And Kirsten, I agree with you. I mean, I would like to see it used to go back for immediate relief, but that was just to respond to Kohler's question too about if we don't have to necessarily use it all. I would imagine we will want to use it all. And I did want to, Sue, to your point, I mean, you make some good comments because honestly, this is a hard issue that a lot of people are struggling with. You know, are we going to take money that we're all going to have to pay? So quite honestly, even staff struggle with this. But I think that in talking to other co-ops and talking to, you know, the auditors and others, it sounds like that money is going to be taken anyway. And so it's not that if we don't take it, it's not going to be paid out. It will be paid out and used. And so I can't remember who said that. Maybe it was, I'm not sure exactly who on this panel, but, you know, I think maybe Kirsten actually, the importance is to get the money back to Durango and Pagosa and this area. So the money's going to be used regardless. It's going to be, someone else is going to take it. And, you know, that's what kind of made me realize, well, maybe we should do this because this brings these benefits back to our local community that someone else would be taking anyway. I hope that helps somewhat.
I would like to get going and vote on this, but I see Kirsten and Jack. So Kirsten, if you got something else, go ahead. Nope. All right, then. The motion is on the table. We've had a good discussion. I think everybody's seen Resolution 2020-09. So all those who are in favor of passing 2020-09 at this time, please unmute and say aye.
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 All those who are opposed, please unmute and say nay at this time.
Nay.
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 Okay, we've got Kohler, Dan, and Sue. Did I miss anybody? Was there anybody who wishes to recuse? Please let me know. All right, so then Kirsten, you could take that as all positive votes except for Kohler and Dan and Sue. I think I got that correct, and so that motion passes. All right, thank you. We can move on to, that was all part of the attorney report, which was good. Shay, was there anything else in the attorney report you wanted to talk to us about?
Just a reminder based on some discussions that we had during new director orientation. You have been provided with your conflict of interest forms from Kara's. You'll need to fill those out and make sure you turn those in. Next month, we're going to be reviewing those as we do on a yearly basis. And so I just wanted to give everybody a reminder on that. And then other than that, I'm happy to visit about any questions you might have regarding the report.
Okay, are there any questions for Shay? All right, then now we're moving to the time of direct reports, and I'm going to put this all into one big question. The reports are in the packet. I apologize for the time and not giving us the opportunity to go over in more detail, but if anybody has any questions on those that they want to get at this time, go ahead and let us know. But remember, you can always specifically ask questions to the writer of the report, and you can copy the board of directors. There's no problem with using email between board meetings, between directors. Kirsten, go ahead. Unmute and go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one thing. If you don't read anything else, read the 10Q. You can go out to the SEC and get it either in the form I sent it out, but you can also get a spreadsheet form. Thank you.
All right. And certainly Kirsten's report is probably the one that has most of the reading to be done in here, as there's a lot there. I've got Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, this would be for the Roundup folks and maybe Hillary as well. It used to be, up until 3 months ago, we listed the Roundup donations that we put out in the Colorado Country Life under, I think it was called Livewire or Hotwire, and that hasn't been in there. And I see we're having a trend of losing Roundup participants. When we put that in the Colorado Country Life, we did that to kind of thank the people that did it and let them know where their money went. But we also used it as a tool to try to get more participants. I don't know if there's another thing that's being put in place, but I hate to see us losing more and more each month of the participants in Roundup, because I do strongly back Roundup.
Kohler,
Okay.
I don't honestly know who makes the decision on putting that in Colorado Country Life, but I understand what you're saying, and I think that that is a good idea. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for flagging that. I'll discuss with Jeannie Bennett, who you know, who's our representative on the administrative piece of the board, and we'll see. It may have just been something that was lost in the transition, but thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And Jeannie has all the history of when we started that and why we put it in there. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack, if you would unmute and go ahead.
Yes, I just want to highlight, I inserted the slide deck from Will Tour, starts on page 110. It's the Colorado greenhouse gas roadmap scenarios. And I put that in there just if you wanted to provide comment or input. I think there's a contact at the end of that slide deck to do so. They're seeking comment. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, I appreciated that. I thought that was a good report, and nice to see how they're trying to figure out how to get that difficult task done. That's ahead of all of us. Okay, I've got Holly. Would you go ahead?
All I was going to add to that with Jack's report on that GHG and inventory is they do have a air quality control committee meeting tonight, and they are accepting comments on that, and I will email out the link to be able to write any comments or the email to that. Thank you for including that, Jack.
You're welcome.
Tim, would you go ahead?
Yeah, just a minor thing. I'm wondering if whoever authors the roundup reports could put their name on it. I wasn't quite sure who to refer to on that. Thanks.
Yeah, that was me, sorry.
Unusual for you not to put your name on something.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? All right. It sounds like we have reached the end of the agenda item, unless anybody has got anything else that wants to go on. Let me, before I release it, what I want to, normally the agenda is like 75% fixed. It's just sort of routine things we have to do. But there's that other 25% that has to do with some of the things that are going on at the time. We tried in the past to have people put things down and vote on them, and that kind of fell by the wayside. And I know it's mostly up to the CEO and the board president to put the agenda together. So what I'd like to ask everybody to do is between now and when the agenda, we're starting to put it together, which is usually in the order of a couple of weeks, email me anything that you'd like to have added to the agenda. I will collect those things and see if we can fit it in and see if there's, and when you email me, you might as well copy the entire board as well. Just say, I'd like to add such and so to the agenda, copy the whole board, and then we will be able to consider that. That should be an easy enough and informal enough thing to do. So if that seems to be acceptable to everybody, that's how I'd like people to request things to be added to the agenda. Now, I know in the past, when I was early on the board of directors was never given the opportunity to ever add anything to the agenda, and I disagreed with that. I thought the directors should be able to speak up and put things on the agenda, but they, of course, have to work through the policies that we have. Is there any discussion or comment on that? I see Dan's hand up. Dan, go ahead.
It's not on that. I'll get with Karis and see how she wants to do this paperwork.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself, how you're going to do all that. But if you have a digital copy, I suppose that would work out all right. But you can work that out with Karis, I think. Other comments or additions on how I would like you to now inform me of what you want on the agenda other than our normal items? No, I don't see anything. I guess that's good. Is there anything else before I adjourn this meeting? I appreciate everybody's patience. I think we're doing okay considering the time. And at that, I will adjourn the meeting and look forward to getting email from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Nice job,
everybody.
Britt. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.